Hi, Christian. I think you may be muted.
Yes, I'm okay, thanks. Are
Yeah,
you?
good. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Good.
I was worried for a second if I normally come 5 minutes, but I've just had some challenges with my Wi-Fi.
All good now, though.
Yeah, all good at the moment. So
Yeah, good.
so glad you could make it. That's your real room, isn't it? That's not a background effect like mine.
No, no, this is the front room at home.
Did you manage to get the solar thing that you were thinking about?
No, not yet. In fact, it's something I need to speak to you about. So we need to have that conversation. I'm particularly interested in the battery situation.
In the battery situation. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that the solar panels are fairly straightforward. It's just the batteries, how many you need. Basically, there's a few things. So I thought I would speak to you.
Yeah. Okay. Christian, can I just check? There are some people who are wanting to try and record or take notes from this meeting. Would you
Okay.
be open to this being
Absolutely.
recorded? Yeah.
Yeah, no
Okay.
problem.
I'll just allow everyone that. Yeah, I think it's important you get professional, advice because as we know, energy is only getting more and more expensive, and in our winter months, it's a bit of a challenge for us to get enough natural energy. So the battery packs are very clever nowadays. There are a lot of people, I think, on this forum who've got battery packs and things like that, and I think they come with a two-way valve where you can also store energy when it's really cheap and it's surplus on the grid.
Yeah.
So you can store it into your battery pack at night time, and then in the day hours, you take it off sunshine, and when you're running out, the battery pack kicks in. So I,
Yeah.
I, I think it's far more viable when you have the battery packs, provided you have the space to store it. And we've had it for about 3.5 years. We've never had to service it or anything like that, which is great.
Good. Good.
We're just going to give everyone maybe another 5 minutes. There's a joke amongst Indians, of the Indians who are there in this group. It's called IST, just like
Okay.
GST, but it's Indian stretchable time. So if you give them a time, they will stretch that possibility to much later. So people will slowly join in. If you say 7 o'clock, then everyone will start coming by
Okay.
7:05. So we'll do a start. We'll maybe make a start at around
Yeah.
five
No
minutes
problem.
past 7, if that's
No
okay.
problem. And how's your
I'm
day
I'm
going?
I'm following you. I don't know if you've seen the program, but I'm following you with all my horror stories of what we've found in tenanted properties and the challenges I've had over the last 5, 6 years that I've been doing it. So you are the starter, and I think I'm the main course. And I hope they
Okay.
don't I hope they don't desert us. Yeah, have you had a busy day?
Yeah, very busy today. Yeah. Yeah, it's just I mean, as I'll explain, it's difficult to put my finger on the market at the moment. It's there's lots of different conflicting things going on, and everything just seems a little bit up in the air and a little bit bitty. And um, normally, I come on these and I'm quite optimistic, and that's not going to be particularly different. I'm not going to be negative, but I don't know. It's just everyone just seems to be holding back at the moment for some reason. Just. Maybe they're waiting for the budget in November, not quite sure what the government will do. I'm sure that's a big part of it. But yeah, yeah. But yeah, always busy, always busy.
I
You?
think I think yeah, I've had a busy clinical day, but I've barely managed to get home in time and get my presentation somewhat ready in time. Um, so yeah, it's been busy. 24 hours never seems Never seems enough. We've got to almost
No, it's true.
manufacture time, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think we've got a sizable number here now, Christian. I think we've got almost, I want to say about 14, 15 people. So
Okay.
I think we'll make a start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining in and joining in on time. Um, Christian will be well known to most of you. He is an experienced financial advisor and mortgage broker and has been holding my little pinky finger right from the time I've started my property journey over the last, I want to say, 6 years or so. And his wealth of experience and timely wisdom has helped us surpass quite a lot of challenges. I wanted to invite Christian back to this forum because I know a lot of you are either looking to refinance and would like to get a better sense of the property market, the buy-to-let products that might be there available right now. And also for some of you who may be considering residential remortgages, Christian is a unique blend of a person who's able to do both commercial mortgages but also residential mortgages for us. So Christian, thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dr. Rao. Um, so yeah, as I was saying, as we were saying then, my general feeling for the market at the moment, and I'm talking whether it's buy to let, commercial, or residential, is it's just a little bit up in the air at the moment. People are nervous about what's coming in the budget. Clearly, the economy isn't doing very well. The government's borrowing 10, 15, 20 billion pounds every month at the moment just to, meet its liabilities. Um, so I think we're going to get a tax rising budget in November. But of course, the government have made various pledges. They're not going to increase income tax. They're not going to increase VAT. And they're not going to increase tax on working people. Quite what the definition of a working person is, I don't know. I mean, I think that's pretty much everybody, regardless of how much you earn, it doesn't matter. Um, and of course, the easy targets tend to be higher rate taxpayers, anyone who's earning over 125,000 a year, because that's more palatable with the vast majority of people. And people who own assets, stocks and shares, properties, things like that. You will know, for those of you that are landlords, and I'm sure it's most of you on here, that there's been numerous changes over the last few years, whether it was the abolition of tax relief on interest payments for buy-to-let properties held in the personal name. There was obviously the additional 3% stamp duty for investment properties over and above the first one that you bought. We could see potentially, I think, maybe some sort of, I'm hesitant to say an increase in stamp duty, but maybe a reform of stamp duty, which I think may penalise those who own several properties, but potentially be more beneficial to those who are first-time buyers or maybe, currently, they're buying an ongoing move onto a second property. I don't think they're going to change anything regarding rental income, particularly if you've done it through a limited company. There are rumours, and it wouldn't surprise me if they start charging national insurance on rental income, but clearly they can only do that through buy-to-let properties held in a personal name. They can't do it through a limited company. So for me, anyone who still owns buy-to-let properties in their personal name, I think that will ultimately be the nail in the coffin. I think even if you're in your 60s and 70s and you've retired and you used part of your pension income or part of your savings to buy a buy-to-let property to give you some sort of income in retirement, retirees don't pay national insurance. They only pay tax on their pension income. If they now have to pay tax and national insurance on the rental income, I think we'll see a situation where there'll be more properties coming on the market. So for those of you who are potentially looking to increase the portfolios or get involved in buy-to-lets, I think it's a good opportunity to do that. Um, we'll see what happens. I mean, I think the other thing for investors such as yourselves that's always in the background is that, as you will know, going through Parliament at the moment is the Renters' Rights Bill that's going to make, obviously, give the tenants a lot more rights than they currently have. Um, I don't think this is a big issue because everybody I deal with are responsible landlords. Um, they care about the tenants. They want the best for the tenants. You know, if the boiler breaks down, there's usually a plumber around fixing it the very next day. But there are clearly landlords out there who don't do that, who don't have their tenants' interests at heart. And I think that's where the Renters' Right Bill is aimed at. And you probably know, I mean, my opinion on politicians, I'll keep it to myself, especially for those of you that are taking notes. Um, but I don't know if you know, but the homeless minister or the ex-homeless minister for the Labour government, she evicted four tenants from one of her houses and then increased the rent by £900 a month and re-advertised the property. And that is one of the things that is being outlawed in the Renters' Rights Bill. So it is very much a case of one rule for them and one rule for everybody else. She has now resigned, but it's just indicative of, unfortunately, the people that are running the country. Um, what I have done tonight, if I can share my screen, I've got a couple of slides I'd just like to go through. Am I able to share my screen, Dr. Rowe? Yeah.
You should at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's starting to say screen sharing, and then we've got Zoom.
There we go.
Yeah, we can see your
Is that on
slides.
there now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
please go ahead. Yeah.
So the first slide I've got, because I think sometimes it's always better to see these things when they're presented graphically because you can go back several years. We've got UK inflation and we can see it went from being very, very low, below actually in 2021, the government's target of 2%, all the way up through COVID when obviously there was pressure on inflation with prices and things like that, all the way to at the end of 2022, 2023, we're running at about 10%. And then when COVID finished and the lockdowns finished and the world got back to normal and the economy got back to normal, you can see that inflation came down quite dramatically through 2023 to 2024. And we found ourselves where we are now at the end of 2025. And you can see that inflation started to creep back up again, which isn't good news for anybody really. I mean, you know, you only have to go to the supermarket or whatever and see that food inflation is one of the causes that is leading to the increase in inflation. There are a couple of other things at play here. I mean, when the government came in last July, they gave a lot of public sector workers inflation busting pay rises. There's been a big increase in the minimum wage. It's meant that there's a lot more money in the economy, and I think that's driving inflation up. I mean, currently at the moment, the UK has the highest rate of inflation in the G7. And whereas in places like Australia, Canada, the US, Europe, inflation's going down, unfortunately in the UK at the moment, inflation is going up. Not dramatically. It's nothing I think ultimately to be worried about in the long term. But obviously, UK inflation has an effect on how everybody's feeling, how much disposable cash people have got, and then ultimately, of course, it has an impact on interest rates. And we can see here where we are with interest rates at the moment. So again, if we go back pretty much to COVID 2022, you can see it's almost like a staircase that the incremental quarter point rises in the interest rates going all the way up to 5%. And we've had, over the last couple of years, we've had four quarter point cuts, and we're now currently at 4% with the Bank of England base rate. I don't think we're going to get any more cuts in the foreseeable future. And when I say the foreseeable future, I don't think we'll have any more cuts this year because of the inflation spike that we saw on the previous slide. Next year, I don't know. I think we need to wait, see what happens in the budget, see where we are in the new year. I do think we will see maybe a couple of quarter point cuts next year, but I don't think it's going to be dramatic. And I think somewhere around 3.5%, maybe 3% if we're lucky, is where we should expect interest rates to be in the medium term. And medium term, I mean anything from, say, 5 to 7, 8 years, maybe 10 years. That's what I would expect interest rates to settle down at. Um, the good news is that despite the slight spike in inflation, the fact interest rates are coming down means that it is having a knock-on effect on interest rates on mortgages. So if you look back on the previous slide, inflation there, if we go back a couple of years, if you wanted a 5-year fixed rate for a limited company, you'd be looking at, I'd be quoting you 6 point something percent. Maybe if you were lucky and you were prepared to pay a big arrangement fee, maybe something in the high fives. There's quite a lot of 5-year fixed rates now starting with a 3. And it's a high 3, it'll be 3.75, 3.85, 3.95. There's probably a 3 or a 5% arrangement fee in there. But it's giving you the option, and the general trend is that rates are coming down. You know, if you wanted to pay, say, a 2% arrangement fee on a 5-year fixed at 75%, you'd probably be paying around about 5%. So the general trend is downwards. If the economy was booming, I may say, well, you know, maybe interest rates aren't going to come down anytime soon. But as I've alluded to, that's not happening at the moment. There are issues with the economy. We'll see what happens in the budget in November. But by and large, the general trend with the interest rates is down, and it's having an impact on mortgage rates. They are coming down. The other good news on the mortgage front as well is there are several lenders that have moved into the limited company lending space. So BM Solutions have come on board, the Coventry Building Society have come on board. Pretty much all the lenders who aren't lending to limited companies are looking to get into that space simply because it is no longer financially viable now to buy to let properties in a personal name. For the reasons I alluded to at the start, even if you can buy a property outright with cash from, say, your savings, you know, you're retiring or you've got a lump sum from your pension and you don't need a mortgage, you know, potentially the government can penalise you with tax. And like I say, we may find that buy-to-lets in personal names will be subject to national insurance on that rental income as well. So why take the chance? Just, you know, do it through a limited company. Even if, like I say, you don't need a mortgage, that's what my advice would be to anyone who is in that position. So the good news is rates are coming down gradually. It is slow, but you know, even a quarter point cut on a mortgage rate, you know, depending on how many properties you own, it can be a few £100s a month. You know, if you own a lot of properties, it can be substantial. I mean, your interest rates on your mortgages are probably, well, they're no doubt your biggest overhead as a limited company business. So if we can get those down, if the interest rates keep coming down and there's more competition in the mortgage market, it's good for investors. And then finally, just a bit of good news, obviously, about the mortgage rates coming down, but as well here, UK house prices. I was quite surprised with this slide because this takes us up until the end of September this year, so literally until a few days ago. Annual percentage in house prices. I mean, I thought this would be pretty flat. I mean, your quid's in if you live in Northern Ireland or you've got a property portfolio in Northern Ireland. But generally, I think the areas that the people on this presentation tend to buy properties in or own properties in, such as the Northwest, Yorkshire, the North, maybe the Midlands. Whilst it's not brilliant, at least you've seen some sort of increase in the capital values of properties. Anything up to between 3 and maybe 5%. There are a couple of issues at the moment with valuations. I've had one or two that have come back recently where there's been slight down valuations, a couple of more substantial down valuations as well. And I think that's just a bit of a knock-on effect from all the reasons that I've alluded to earlier. The chartered surveyors that are going out and doing these valuations, they're thinking in the back of the head, well, what's going to happen in the budget? Is this going to be an investor's market? Are the tax changes going to change the situation in the landscape? Will the demand for investment properties fall and have an impact on prices? Are the government going to change the rules around, how the personal buy-to-let properties, the rent, sorry, the tax, and potentially national insurance are going to affect it. So I think it's a combination of things really, that is just gumming up the market a little bit. And I think everyone will just be glad to see the budget, get it out of the way, understand how it's going to affect them as property investors, and their businesses, and then everyone can just crack on and get on with it. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned over the years, people just don't like uncertainty. It's just a big thing is not knowing, what's going to be happening in the next 2 or 3 months, let alone in the next 2 or 3 years. Um, there's some positives there. Obviously, the negative is inflation and the economy isn't doing particularly well, but mortgage rates are coming down, property prices are going up, not massively, but I mean, if you were living in Northern Ireland looking at that chart now, I'd think that's great. But how many years can you go above 9, 10%, house price inflation? That's just bubble territory for me. So, I think it's better to take something a little bit more like 4 or 5% and just know that it's steady, it's just happening. The rents are coming in, you're paying the mortgages, you've got some surplus income to keep reinvesting. And in the meantime, the property's going up in value rather than having the peaks and troughs that they may be having in Northern Ireland in a year or two. We just don't know, but we shall see. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's some good news there. It's just like I say, at the moment, everything's just a little bit up in the air. Long term, where do I think interest rates will be in, say, 5 years' time? I'd like to think that the Bank of England would have base rates around 3, 3.25%. And if that's the case, then, as a limited company, buy-to-let investor, I always think you're probably going to be paying on average 0.75 above Bank of England base rate for a 5-year fixed rate. So on that sort of scale, you'd be looking at 4.25, 4.5% with a modest lender fee on there. And clearly, if you want a lower rate, those rates will exist, but expect to pay a 3, 5% lender arrangement fee on the mortgage. So that's pretty much it from me. If you've any questions, please fire away.
Oh, thanks, Christian. That is really good and a great snapshot summary of where we are in the market. So thank you for that. To the network, if you want to ask any questions, then please feel free to either raise your hands or type in the chat box, and I can try and have a system of making sure we go through all relevant questions. Whilst people are making up their mind, Christian, I had this thought about any market when the government is compelling landlords who own property in your own name to kind of not do so anymore, um, that then means people either start offloading their assets or bringing those properties to market. And the people then seeking to buy it are, I would have thought, incorporated buy to let investors like there are in this network. Uh, is the fact that some of the bigger building societies slowly making their way into the limited company market an indication of the trend that we are likely to see in the short term to medium term future? And the second consequence of that question is, does that then mean we have slightly more competition amongst lenders to give us juicier lending rates?
So that's a really good question, and it ultimately, I think any competition is good, particularly if it helps you as investors get a better interest rate or have more options. I should caveat a couple of things here. Whenever a lender moves into a space that they're not familiar with, it's very much baby steps. So, for example, Metro Bank came into the market for limited company lending 12, 18 months ago. Um, and they were offering rates beginning with a three at a time when, your 5-year fixes were beginning with a five with the established lenders. And the problem with that is their criteria is very restrictive. They won't lend to anyone who owns 10 or more properties. And that's not just 10 mortgage properties, that's 10 properties, full stop. Um, so you could have, you know, 12, 20, 15 properties, however many, and you can't access Metro Bank. PM Solutions have come to the market. Coventry, who are also known for their buy-to-let arm is Godiva, have come to the market, and they've got exactly the same restrictions. It's 10 properties, regardless of whether you've got mortgages on them, regardless of who those mortgages are. So if you own 9 properties and you want a mortgage with BM Solutions on a limited company, you can only take one mortgage out. And after that, nothing else. You can't ever go back to BM unless you sell properties. So there are the really experienced established lenders, such as your Landbays, your Paragons, your Aldermores, your Foundations. They have no limit on the number of properties. They've been doing limited company lending for years, since before people were even, thinking of putting properties in limited companies. That was a very, very specialist area 15, 20 years ago. They do it day in, day out. They know the market. Now, if I go to one of the new players in the market, and for example, there is an intercompany loan involved, forget it. They don't even know what an intercompany loan is. An underwriter will never have known what an intercompany loan is. If it's a director's loan, they understand that, but they haven't got the indemnity or the legal structure in place to understand why, for example, a medical practice with the same directors and owners and shareholders may want to put some of the money from that medical practice into a property SPV. They can't understand why you would do that, what the rationale is. They're not geared up to do it. And there's lots of other stuff as well. However, if you're just starting out on the buy to let adventure, if that's the right word, it's certainly an adventure, and you've set up a limited company, then you can put the first 10 properties you buy in with Metro Bank, Godiva, PM Solutions, providing it's not complex lending, providing there are no more than 2 directors and 4 shareholders. And they'll do those, and the rates will be ever so slightly more competitive. But once you get past that 10, if you want to keep going, you've then got to go to the real specialist buy-to-let lenders, in answer to your question.
Okay, thanks,
Um,
Christian. So for those people in this network who are relatively early on their journey, always good to take professional advice from a seasoned broker like Christian so that the right kind of product can be matched to the right kind of requirements. I'll take some questions from the chat box if now
yeah,
that's
yeah,
okay,
yeah. Go on.
Christian.
Yeah,
The first one I think is from Yogesh to say, so where would you buy property in UK now? I guess your slide showing how Ireland and how the north of England is doing is in a sense the evidence, isn't it, to the in a sense the answer to the question. Is that fair, Christian? Is that what you would say
yeah,
as well?
yeah. It says, "Hi, Yogesh." I would say obviously not Northern Ireland. um, As daft as that sounds, I just think, 10% can't be maintained in the long term. And I would be worried if I was buying property in Northern Ireland on the back of a 10% rise. Um, at the moment, Yogesh, pretty much anywhere Birmingham northwards is where I'm getting the inquiries. Um, I mean, I keep expecting to come on these presentations and tell you Manchester is finished, it's gone, it's over, because Manchester's had this fabulous, fabulous. I mean, I live just on the outskirts of Manchester, and I'm doing mortgages now for people I've known for 20 years, and their properties, still in the same properties. They haven't doubled, they haven't trebled. They've like quadrupled or quintupled over 20 years. I'm just staggered. I'm seeing these same houses that they bought for 100,000 and they're now remortgaging for 550,000, 15, 20 years later. It's just staggering. It really is. But there's lots going on in Manchester. The BBC located here. We've got Media City. It is almost like its own place. I mean, property is hideously expensive, but it's still getting good yields. Birmingham's pretty good. The Midlands area is pretty good. And we're seeing quite a bit. I mean, I've shown numerous slides on these presentations where places like Nottingham, Sheffield, university towns, places like that are good. If you want the yields, you go to the northeast of England because the properties are cheap and the rents are high relative to what you're paying for the property. And the further south you go, and Yogesh, I'm sure you will know this coming from where you do, but the yields in the south of England, the average is about 4.5%, I think, at the moment on residential property.
Yeah, and I just want to, if I may, Christian, make the case here that sometimes boring is good. When you showed us the 5% growth in the north of England, when you leverage it, imagine buying a 200,000 property, growing at 5% a year for 5 years.
Yeah.
That's 25% growth on a 200,000 property. So if it becomes worth 250,000, which is an uplift of 50,000, but you originally only put down 50,000 as the deposit with a 25% deposit and a 75% loan to value, you've effectively, in a sense, doubled your money because all the other costs of stamp duty, legals, etc., hopefully is offset with all the rental income you'll have got over the 5 years as well. So sometimes boring is good, and inflation sometimes drives rents as well. Remember, rents always stay in line or in fact just above inflation because we have a shortage of housing supply in this country. So
Yeah.
it's important to just make that case because when we're looking at asset classes or investments, leveraged property, I think, is still high up there, isn't it, Christian?
Yeah, it is definitely. And just one thing I'd add to that. Um, don't forget, if property prices are going up 5% a year, you're compounding that. So in your first year, after first year, the property's worth 210,000. You're then getting 5% of 210,000. So actually, the 50,000 is closer to 75,000 with the compounding over the 5 years. And that's the great thing about the property. If you've got tenants in there, if you're looking after those tenants, you're not suffering with rental voids. Um, you would take 5% over Northern Ireland, 10%, and then maybe -2% in a couple of years' time, and the peaks and troughs. Just, slow and steady wins the race. It always has done, always will do. So it's great because you're quite right. Not only can you leverage the purchase of the asset, Dr. Rowe, but you're compounding the capital growth as well. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Well made. The next question, I think Girish is asking, do we see the turbulence caused by the war in Europe, etc.? Is there chatter? He wants inside gossip on is there chatter in professional circles amongst
Yeah.
mortgage
Hi,
advisors?
Girish. Yeah, there definitely is. I would say pretty much to anyone who isn't experienced or who's dipping the toe into buy-to-lets for the first time, do a 5-year fixed. Really, just go put your head on the pillow at night and sleep well because it's not just the war in Europe. We've all seen what's happened in Manchester today. China potentially invading Taiwan. We've got just seeming conflict everywhere at the moment. I can't remember a time when just in my lifetime when the world's just seemed so unstable. It seems like there's not one day passes where there isn't something just you know I don't know, just all being a little bit mad. So if you're highly leveraged, if you're inexperienced, if you are risk averse and then just naturally a worrier, do a 5-year fixed every time, every time. Don't take any chances.
Uh, the next question I think is to do with the kind of two different domains. Are you seeing more lending now available for holiday lets, and are you seeing demand coming to you for auction purchases, which then need refinancing or remortgages?
Yeah, Yogesh, both. As you will know, when the pandemic came, lots of lenders came into the holiday lets because everyone was holidaying in the UK. And then when that little bubble, because it was a bubble at the time, had gone by, lots of lenders pulled out of it. There are several lenders who've come back into that market now. It's become a much more professionalized rather than just your occasional landlord who thought they might dip the toe. So in answer to your question, yeah, there are a lot more holiday let lenders available. And regarding auction sales, I've always said to investors, auction's a great way to buy property. If you can get the right price, um, there's a reason it's going to auction. It's a distressed property, it's a distressed sale. The property needs some TLC, it needs some refurbishment, or someone's desperate to sell it for whatever reason. If that's reflected in the price you pay at auction, there's a real good opportunity there for you to have some equity in that property from day one. If you need to refurbish it, you can refurbish it, build some equity, maximize your rents. It's a great way of doing it. Yes.
Okay, the next one, I don't know. You can give this a pass if you want, Christian. But question is, are you seeing HMRC maybe forensically looking at more detail at this personal to limited company incorporation? This is a situation where landlords own property in their own name, and then they're transferring it, maybe not always paying stamp duty, and calling it, limited company incorporated. I think the question revolves around that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, evening, MJ. In answer to your question, no, I'm not. Because if you own property and you want to put it in a limited company and you come to me and say, look, I need a limited company mortgage, this is what I'm doing. If you haven't been and spoke to an accountant and actually drawn up how you're intending to move that property, and I'm in a personal name to a limited company name, I'll say, come and see me when you've spoke to your accountant and you've decided how you're doing it. Um, the best way to do it is to inform HMRC of what you're doing before you do it and get them to agree that you're doing it in an appropriate way. The wrong way to do it is to go with one of these schemes that will tell you that they can do it and avoid stamp duty and potentially capital gains tax, which they can't. And then you do it all wrong and HMRC come after you. I have a landlord who owns 70 properties all in his personal name. Every one of them is mortgaged. And he went with a scheme, and I can't remember it, it was 1 something, I think. And he has spent maybe 300,000 or 400,000 trying to unpick what happened with this scheme. I mean, the company running this scheme now have gone under. But he's trying to unpick it all with HMRC. It's costing him a fortune. So, in answer to your question, if you do it right, you see a solicitor who specialises in property tax, sorry, a solicitor, an accountant who specialises in property tax, then the answer to the question is no. I had one completed in February this year. It was 12 properties. it was all agreed with the taxman. HMRC were happy. It was a seamless transaction because all the parties knew what they were doing and everything was agreed. And by the way, MJ, if we go to a lender or you go to a lender now for a limited company mortgage for a property that somebody already owns in their personal names, one of the things the limited company mortgage lender will ask for is the advice, a copy of the advice you've received from your accountant, because they don't want to do a mortgage and find out that then you've got to pay all this stamp duty and capital gains tax in a couple of years' time and you can't afford to pay the mortgage.
Yeah. Thanks, Christian. That's really, really good advice. And then while I'm waiting for some more questions, Girish, what happens to property prices when there is war? Um, do you want to take that one, Christian? What is your experience? There are wars all over the world. What's happening to
Yeah, I
property
can't do it.
prices?
It's very upbeat, isn't it? um, I mean, Girish, what I would say is, fortunately, the war is on the other side of Europe. Um, I mean, it's tragic what's happening in the Ukraine at the moment. I really feel sorry for them. They're going into another winter, and yeah, it's appalling. Can I say it's not having an effect? No, it is having an effect, but it's not having an effect on property prices as such. It's having an effect on the European economy in general because Ukraine is in Europe. Europe's had to buy its gas from Qatar, whereas it was buying it from Russia. It's had to buy its oil from the Middle East, whereas it was buying it from Russia previously. That's one of the reasons inflation has gone up, its energy prices as well. It's not dramatically having an effect in the UK, but if the war wasn't happening in Ukraine and the economy was a little bit more buoyant, I think we'd be seeing a little bit more buoyancy in the property market as well. So I can't say it's not affecting property prices, but I think in the UK it's negligible.
Um, I'm going to try and bring this discussion more back to Christian's area of expertise and for what we are here for. Christian, I have a cheeky question. I'm going to ask you to now look at your crystal ball, okay?
Yeah.
Because you've got the experience that not many people do have. And my question is forecasting for the next 5 to 6 years, which is we are now seeing rents gradually increasing at the level of inflation, but you have interest rates either plateauing or possibly even taking a dip. And so this gap that will eventually creep up where you have rents that are in effect keeping in pace with inflation, but lending, which is, if you like, particularly with leveraged property below inflation. Do you see that as a potential boost, if you like, for the market as a whole over the sometime in the next 4 or 5 years? Because you've certainly forecasted 3.5% being the Bank of England base rate, sitting somewhere there. Do you see that being a key factor in the coming 4 to 5 years?
I do, to be honest. I mean, as I said, your biggest cost is your mortgage cost. It's the interest on your mortgage. Um, I, it's a tough one because on the slides I showed, we've got inflation going up and the Bank of England base rates coming down. Um, for those of you that own property, you will know that rents have gone up quite a bit. You've been able to put rents up quite a bit in the last few years. Um, so, in answer to your question, do I see a bounce? Very much so. I mean, your interest costs, your interest rate costs, your mortgage costs are your biggest overhead as a business. Um, so, I do think that will have a bounce. I'm hesitant only in so much as if interest rate doesn't, if interest rates, sorry, if inflation doesn't come down and the government do finally find a bit of growth in the economy, we're probably going to see interest rates where they are now, more or less, maybe 3.75, 4%, 4% now. Um, I think it's a combination at the moment. If the economy's pretty flat, and therefore, the government want the Bank of England to cut interest rates to stimulate economic growth. Um, but in answer to your question, Dr. Out, yes, I think we will see a bounce, and I think it'll be a short-term bounce, like you say. I don't think you're waiting 5 or 6 years for this bounce. I think it'll be 2 or 3 years.
Okay, um, that's really good, Christian. Thank you so much for all your insights and for giving us your time, your experience, and your expertise. Um, I'll just finish off by thanking you on behalf of the whole network, and maybe invite you again in the second quarter of 2026 to see if the forecasted maybe quarter point drop or 2 quarter point drops truly truly do happen. But
Yeah,
thank you so much
great.
for giving us your time this evening, Christian.
My
Much
pleasure.
appreciated.
Thanks, guys. Nice to see you all again, and I'll no doubt I'll see you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Cheers. You're
Bye bye.
welcome. You're welcome to stay if you want to be bored, but
Let's
you're
have some
also
dinner
welcome,
if that's
Sam.
okay. No, I've not eaten. Yes,
what have
thank
you
you.
what have you made?
Cajun chicken tonight.
We might join you then.
More than welcome. See you later.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Christian. So we will move on to the next part, which is you've got boring old me trying to talk to you about all my nightmares. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, just if someone can, maybe Yogesh, since I've got you on screen, I can only see you. Give me a thumbs up if you can see me.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I would like for this to be a relatively open session. Feel free to share your own case studies, etc. If you want to. I've been only doing this for about 6 years, so since 2019, and then we had the pandemic in 2020. So I've got some interesting case studies which I thought I would share with you, both in terms of the challenges to us as landlords, and then the common obstacles that we are likely to encounter, and what I've done with those. Um, Feel free to button. I can't see the chat box anymore. So if you have a question, then I'm afraid you'll just have to unmute yourself and ask the question. Um, so key challenges for UK landlords. You'll really, when you look at that list, you'll really wonder, is it really worth becoming a UK landlord? And you can see why there is a shift from people just owning properties in their own names, or properties that they owned or lived in previously and then became accidental landlords when they had to move over. That era is pretty much now going to go away. There's an expectation by law for us to be running this, like a business, which is why the government wants us to own these properties in limited company names. And that protects us as well, because when you own a property in your own name, you're directly responsible for the tenant. But when you own it in a limited company, the limited company, in a sense, is the filter. The responsibility is that of the company rather than the individuals within the company. So these are the typical challenges, and I'll talk you through some of these challenges I've had: rent arrears, people not paying, ensuring we are keeping everything legally kosher. What are the challenges sometimes in managing the void periods, and what are all the standards we are required to meet before we now let these properties? Gas safety. Eventually, we will have energy performance certificates coming in, expecting the landlord to keep these properties to a very high eco-efficient kind of standard. EICR certificates, I'm sure a lot of you all are aware of. Every 5 years, this needs to be reviewed. And now, if you own HMOs, it's not just electrical, you need to also be putting fire safety certificates in, or assessments and certificates in place as well. Then, whilst the tenancy is going on, there can be challenges in not just managing the tenant, but managing the property, and any issues that arise to your neighbors from these resident tenants in there. And at the end of the tenancy, you've got to make sure that, if you are dipping into the tenancy deposit, you're using appropriate schemes in the first place, you're ensuring compliance to make sure that you can then tap into that deposit if needs be. So I'll give you only some brief examples because the variety of things that I've encountered are quite a bit, but I thought I would only pick three or four that will hopefully spark a debate and encourage some more questions as well. So, my very first property, or one of the very first properties, is this very nice two-bedroom flat in Woolwich. Londoners in the group over here, Yogesh and I think I saw Chirag's name as well. Will hopefully know this development. It's in Woolwich, junction of Zone 3, Zone 4, and my flat is on the fourth floor there. Really smart two-bedroom apartment. Um, high end, I would say, because Barclay Homes doesn't do anything cheap. It's got amazing gym and sauna and swimming facilities, and it's got the Clipper service, which takes you from this little dock that you can see. There are boats that take you into central London by 20 minutes. So um, it's at the high end, and you would have thought for these kind of high end properties, nothing will go wrong. 2019 to 2020, no problem. 2020 till June 2020, no problem. And then come June 2020, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. I'm going to say his name because I'm allowed to. There's no GDPR applicable here. His name was Mr. Daniel Peacock, who worked for a big property developer, originally offered to pay the rent upfront 6 months in cash, and that was tempting, but we said no, that's fine. You stick to paying it on a monthly basis. So he paid the rent for the first month, and then the second month onwards there was no rent payment, and there was the second wave of COVID. We went into lockdown. There were immense restrictions, but there was no rent paid. He abused the system. You guys will remember during the COVID pandemic, the government said landlords are not really allowed to evict any tenants who are not paying rent. And as a result, we had 6 months of him not paying rent in spite of us trying to chase him up. Agents were not able to go and get in touch with this tenant at all. Um, and luckily for me, at about 8 months or so, there was a police incident that happened where three drunk boys were found driving a car inside the building. And the local security team found out that these boys had come for a party in the flat. As events transpired, this was in fact a criminal who was using the place for prostitution and for throwing high-end parties. We only got this from a police report much later. So I had to initiate eviction proceedings. The whole process took, a long, long time. It took it took me through a big journey of trying to identify what exactly is the process. So I had to involve the agents. We had to provide a formal written notice in place, then put together all of the evidence. I used my membership with NRLA, the National Residential Landlords Association, to ask them what exactly is the process. And for my good luck, um, my agents in London had already put in a rent protection guarantee in place. And that rent protection guarantee, I mean, I didn't know it to be honest at the time, also included legal cover. So that meant that I could employ the services of a solicitor to initiate the court action, file it in court, explain the reasons for requesting of eviction and repossession. Eviction is slightly different to repossession, okay? Eviction is you're just looking to evict the tenant, you're giving them notice. They still have a window period in which they could potentially pay the rent back, etc. And then after that, possession is when the court says you can possess the property and if the tenant is not leaving, then it'll instruct bailiffs to go and do this on your behalf. What I realized was, I mean, this was rent of close to £2,000. And by the time we were able to get through all of this process, it was nearly 12 months. So it's a huge chunk of money, £24,000, which I was out of pocket with. And imagine this was one of my starting learning curves in property. So having reserve funds to really cover the mortgage interest payment is key. There was a temptation at that time to, because we were going through the pandemic, to defer interest payments because a lot of limited companies were doing this. We didn't do that. And I learned a lot about the process and what all kinds of evidence you need to accumulate to be able to then make a claim in court. So this actually went to county court, and you had to put in exhibits clearly showing evidence one by one. What helped our case was the tenant, Mr. Daniel Akinola, never turned up, and that always pisses off the county court judges. And with all of the sequential evidence that we were able to put in, the court immediately ruled in our favor. But even from the time the court ruled in our favor, it took an additional 2 months, and you will not believe this guy came back, broke the door down because he wanted to access drugs. This was picked up on CCTV. So we were able to then accelerate the possession notice, which again is normally about 6 weeks or so, but we were able to do it in 3 weeks and get it done that way. So lessons learned, what could I have done differently? In this particular case, I think we could have done the referencing process a bit more diligently, maybe got two more additional landlords reference. And as it turns out, this particular gentleman has been found doing this continuously for the last 7 years, is there on the Metropolitan Police's wanted list. So if you come across a gentleman called Daniel Akinola, guys, I don't have a photograph of him, but be wary about lending to anyone called Daniel in the future. Um, the whole process of eviction and legal compliance, I mean, I learned a lot during the process. This was during the days when you could use Section 8. Things have moved on now. It was very, very important to keep yourself appraised of current law. The Renters' Rights Bill is likely to change quite a few things. So let's watch this space, and hopefully we can get updates through that as well. This is how it typically works. You have to first give notice. You then need to file everything at the county court. There is then a hearing. If the tenants don't turn up, the date can be deferred, which means there is a further delay to you getting it. In our case, there was one deferred hearing, and then when he didn't turn up for the second one, but by the second one, we had the police report, etc., as well. So the judgment was issued to us, and then finally there was eviction. But what was very helpful was that our agent kept evidence of all the notices that were sent, and in fact the notices were sent through a personal courier service, which also helped. So keeping communication logs of how you communicated by email, by recorded delivery, sometimes in person, all of this is very, very important when you're trying to, if God forbid you have to go through a similar process like this. The next bit I'll touch upon is compliance, safety, and certifications. Now, we are, as professional landlords, certainly now that it's now become a business, required to do this on an annual basis. Okay. If you even miss your gas safety by one day, and God forbid there is a fire in that property because of a boiler issue or what have you, we will get it in the neck. So keeping these records of everything is vital. And that's where a good agent perhaps will come in play as well. If you guys don't have the time and you are like me, time poor, then making sure your agent is doing that on a timely fashion and giving you a 2 month notice period before the annual gas safety check is due is important. Don't think it is light. These are all our legal responsibilities. 5 year EICR intervals. Again, within your EICR, this is your electrical safety certificate. There are sometimes comments made saying, although it has passed, it's a little bit like your MOT. Although your car may have passed, there may be issues with the brakes or there may be issues with the lights. So have a look at those reports as well and put some remedial actions, in place and evidence that as well. Each of our properties now has to have an EPC certificate. And for everyone in this network, we've had talks on this before. Start moving towards EPC-C if you're not doing this already. Then it's very important that smoke and carbon monoxide alarms are regularly tested. If you have a situation of carbon monoxide poisoning or a tenant leverages this against you, the only way you can counter evidence this is by saying that alarms were there and they were tested on a regular basis. A fair amount of our portfolio is HMO licensed properties. So it's very, very important that you look at those standards. Every 5 years, those will be reviewed anyway. So that's a good check mechanism. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because it then means that you're staying compliant with everything that is being said. And a third party, an external party, is coming, visiting your property and saying, pass. Yes, you are meeting the standards. Or if you have not met it, what are the things you need to do to remedy it? If you're protecting the deposit, please don't keep the money with yourself. Um, Again, if the tenant ever takes you to court or takes you to small claims court, you'll be in real trouble if you haven't used one of these schemes, or your managing agent hasn't taken it to one of these schemes. And a new additional burden on us is to really comply with this, which is checking whether the person who you're lending it to has the right to stay in the UK and rent the property. You might say that's not my problem. Unfortunately, legally, it is.
Prithvi, the question with regards to carbon monoxide alarm testing,
Yeah.
normally it's in the contract that it's tenant's responsibility to check whether it's working or not, especially when you have properties not local to you. Um, and obviously, agents may do 6 monthly check, but if you're self-managing a property which is far off, it's mentioned in the contract. So aren't they legally liable to test those alarms then?
Even then, even in that situation, what you need to maybe do is send a reminder notice if that's what you put in your contract. Get your tenant to confirm to you in a 3 monthly basis so that you're doing your share of the responsibility. If they then write back saying, yes, I've checked, it's all good, then tick box, isn't it? You're kind of holding them accountable to it. What you have to understand is when things go wrong, the optics of it always is that they could turn around and blame you, because it then becomes their word against your word. And as much evidence that you can have as is possible is only good for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
Prithvi, who is
yeah.
responsible for the alarms? We are responsible for installing them. But subsequently, if you have a long-term tenant, then technically it is the tenant, isn't it?
No, no, not unless it's written in the contract. You as a landlord have to still go and maybe check if it's not written into contract. Like a doorbell. You may have a doorbell, you installed it in good faith, but if after 3 months it's become non-functional, just because you installed it in good faith doesn't mean that your responsibility ends. Here we are talking of fire alarms and smoke alarms, isn't it? So most
Yeah.
good managing agents, as part of their inspection report, will tell you whether it is working or batteries are dead or not. And you
Okay.
have to be a little bit more explicit than in your tenancy contract about who's going to take responsibility for it. Most landlords on a 3 or a 4 monthly basis will go and just check the property and make sure it's all okay. What we do is we have a maintenance guy who just goes around, replaces batteries when it needs be, because a huge portfolio of ours is student properties or professional lets, and those tenants never manage it. At least because we have a system in place, we just put it in writing, ready-made A4 template saying check done for this property, and it is recorded somewhere. But I can tell you that if we have not done it and there are issues, we've had, not directly with me, but a close friend of mine, where there was a fire, and when the fire brigade came, they identified, and the tenants then sued the landlord, and housing standards officers from the local council conducted a visit, and they asked for all this evidence. And when no evidence was there, the court ruled in favor of the tenant. So there is precedence. You can look it up if you want. Um, Routine maintenance versus emergencies. You're required to now be shown to be responsive. Okay, we all kind of know that. All good landlords will know that, but also know that for emergencies, you can access the property. Gas leak being one such example. You can go in without giving notice, but otherwise that house or that flat actually belongs to the tenant. So you need to be um, giving advance notice. Again, that will be explicit in your tenancy contract, but you need to be giving advance notice to the tenant that you're coming in and doing these things. Also being clear about the time duration of work being done. So to give you one example, one of our HMO properties, the inspector came and said that the stairs, the height of the stairs, the ceiling, it doesn't allow us to let out the loft bedrooms. So can you imagine, we had to remove the joist and lift the height of the ceiling to make it fire safe for the two tenants who were living in the loft to come down, and we had to do this within a 4 to 6 week period. How we did it was we rehoused those two tenants in the loft for 2 weeks in an Airbnb. The insurance covered it. We had an insurance that allowed us to do that. Did the work while the remainder of the tenants were in the property, giving them all £50 Amazon vouchers for the inconvenience caused. Then did the work, allowed for the ceiling height to be elevated, and made it compliant. Otherwise, there is a risk that it is non-compliant. So trying to be proactive with these things is very, very important. And again, showing that you're responding quickly to your tenants is very important. If an agent is doing that for you, you can always ask them to show you the evidence of how they're keeping a log of communication with the tenants. This is an interesting one. So we've had multiple situations where our student-led properties, we've had neighbors complain, saying parties are going on till quite late at night. This is a residential suburb. And in the first instance, I didn't quite know what to do because some of my initial journey as a property manager was self-managed. I didn't use an agent. And at that time, we started using this little device called Minute, I think it was MINUT, which allows you to monitor the decibel levels in the property. And as it transpired, the property was actually perfectly fine. There were no issues. I was able to demonstrate that this was just a very difficult neighbor who didn't like students living in that house and was simply escalating this to the local council, the housing standards officers and under the Environmental Act. Um, so we had all of that evidence to show. We then got some written statements from the neighbors that we were in very good terms with. All that evidence then allowed us to really make the case back with the council that we are adhering to all norms. So you might sometimes, as landlords, get notices from the environment officers of your local council. Just make sure, again, there you follow the norm of listening to both sides. You may have to conduct the investigation, or your managing agent needs to conduct the investigation. You would think, why do I need to do that? We have to. It's almost as if you are resident in the property. And if your tenant is in breach of contract because they're not supposed to really play loud music beyond certain hours, then you can hold the tenant to account, and transfer the responsibility back to them. So balance the rights that you have versus the tenant's privacy there as well. We then had a situation where this was in 2021, where you can, I don't know if you can see my picture okay, but one of our houses, it's a mid-terrace property, the main beam at the top of this roof, the main beam caved in. And when it caved in, there was a real risk to all of the tenants in that house. It was a nightmare because this was in spring of that particular year, and we had 5 tenants. It was a 5-bed HMO. There was no way we could keep them in safely at that point in time. So again, I was very lucky. I got advice from NRLA, and I had an insurance with CIA where there was a 3-month protection cover where if in situations like this you have to rehouse your tenants, they will do that for you, and they will bear the cost apart from the excess that you have to pay. I had to get some advice. The tenants were believe it or not, the tenants were refusing to leave the property. They were saying, do it after our tenancy finishes in June. And that wasn't a risk that I was prepared to take. So this is a funny situation where I have to tell my tenants that it is not safe for you to stay in this house. You are my responsibility. I will find you better accommodation somewhere else. My network with the Sheffield landlords was really good because there was someone who was looking to sell their student property, and it was a really good spec, much better spec than my place. So they got much better rooms, and I was able to show the evidence that if they don't agree, I'd have to take this to court to house them, but I have to repair this quickly. And my problems didn't unfortunately end there. I had to do this quickly because from the 30th of June, so this happened in March, 30th of June, I had new tenants who were due to move in as well. And beyond 3 months, it would all be out of my own pocket. So we started working quickly. We tried to get a party wall agreement from our neighbors, and the neighbor on the right signed it. The neighbor on the left didn't come back to us, but verbally told us that it was all okay. And that was a mistake, I guess, on my part. You can see the beam over here. In party walls, you want the beam to be sitting on the party wall on both sides, left side and right side. On left side, it wasn't a problem. On right side, he then created a real issue for us by calling in the police and saying that this was done without my permission. So for nearly 2 or 3 weeks, the work was all stalled. The police asked us for where is the written agreement. We then had to go back to this particular neighbor and say, what would it take for us to get this done? Because we need to get this done. And he wanted his entire loft to be reboarded, replastered, and painted. So this was around 2 or 3 thousand pounds worth of extra cost, which I had to bear, but it allowed us to go ahead with the work. We had to put, as you can see, beams not just in that particular apex bit over there, but also on either side on the floor. But we were able to do it. So yeah, the personal touch always works. I went and met the neighbor in person, tried to explain who I was. Turned out that I had treated his granddaughter at Sheffield Children's Hospital, so my being a doctor helped in some way. Good fortune favors the brave, and was able to resolve it. But quite a stressful time then. Um, I know some people in this group have holiday lets. Um, I'm only conscious of time, so I'll try and whiz through it. But we had a situation where one of our properties was paid for using a Stripe card. I don't know if you've heard of the Stripe. It's like a credit card system. Now, the people who used it paid the money in advance. I think it was £1,400 or so for the entire week or 8 days. And by the fourth day, the neighbor who we were in very good terms with had called up the police because he thought something is going wrong. The police tried to bang on the property. These guys wouldn't open it. The police didn't have a warrant to search the property. So they just banged, and then they tried to contact me. I was not in the country at the time, so they were not able to get through to me. Um, and 2 days later, I picked up the voicemail and I called my neighbor. And my neighbor, this was when I didn't have any operating agent, and because this was a Airbnb, the person who was managing the Airbnb wasn't informed about any of this. So I informed them. They then contacted the police, came with the keys, but by this time the property was vacant. The entire place was trashed, and these were basically druggies who had completely destroyed the lounge, the TV sets, etc. When we tried to investigate and look into it, it was done through holidaycottages.co.uk. That was the booking portal. And I had to then recoup my money. It took nearly 3 months, but it recouped my money through Stripe because they have an insurance for these kinds of payments. Turns out it was an illegal transaction. It was a stolen card. So the guy whose card was stolen obviously was not willing to authorize this payment, but the card was used. So Stripe had to honor, as the middleman, like Visa or MasterCard, Stripe had to honor that particular payment. And holiday cottages were sent this evidence of before and after to check that if they have any insurance or indemnity in place. They did, and they paid partly for the damages that were caused to the property. So although you can put checks in place, that's why using portals like Airbnb and all, I think is much better because they have a ready-made insurance in place to protect you, and their deposits are much healthy as well. This was from Pillow Partners, the company that was managing it, who confirmed many months later in 2021. This happened again in September 2020, but many months later in January 2021, they confirmed that the money was paid back for that particular property. I'll finish off with a nice story. We bought this. I think Yogesh was asking about purchasing properties at auction. We purchased this property at auction. We got a structural survey done. Everything was kosher. We thought everything is great. It's a mid-terraced property. Till my builder said, I think we should just explore how big the loft is. So he went into the loft. Does anyone want to take a guess on what they may have found? Audience, unmute
Opium.
and
Opium.
opium.
I think you mentioned cannabis farms on your slide.
Have I? Oh dear. Right. Okay.
You
So,
let you let
I've
the answer.
given it up, haven't I? Okay. So this is a property where we bought it at auction. It's recently bought in July of 2025. And our builder goes into the loft. You can see it's very bizarrely insulated. And the eaves are all covered up with this kind of tape. All, all of that is the apparatus for making cannabis. It's a cannabis farm. And I don't know if you can see this container. So they use excessive amount of heat. The reason they insulate it like this is there are drones that are being operated by police officers, which looks at heat sensors. When you insulate it like this, you can't detect any heat inside the property. In this particular property, the electrical company which was providing the electricity there, they took off the fuse boxes because these guys were using it for cannabis, and the electricity bill was 11,500 pounds. Yeah, Girish, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, no, I'll wait for you to finish because I have a similar question.
Yeah, okay. So on this one, the fuse boxes, the entire fuse box has been taken away, and my nightmare now is that we have zero electrical supply. The utility provider refuses to provide us with electricity till we provide a deposit of 2,000 pounds. It's going through a legal battle to say we are not responsible for historic use of electricity at this property, but there is some caveat with the energy ombudsman to say that if it's crossed 10,000 pounds, we should have been aware of it prior to purchasing it at auction. We have put in a claim stating the auction house never stated it anywhere. Neither the seller stated it to us nor the auction house stated it to us, and it is not part of the conditions of sale. It's finally come through in our favor. Now we've had to pay a 2,000 pound deposit to just get a fuse box installed. It's taken us 3 months just to install a fuse box. Without a fuse box, there's no EICR, there is no gas safety, there's no boiler servicing. When we saw this, we informed the police, although my builder told me you bought the house for 130,000. If you sold all the cannabis that was identified here, we would have made 150,000. So I'm now wondering whether going back in time, it would have been a better idea to stick with his plan. Um, but when the police came, I mean, I thought they would not be surprised, but they were shocked. They came with a small, 4x4 extended SUV, and then eventually they needed a truck because there was 600 kilograms of cannabis that was made in just such a small, place. That street value is apparently 143,500 pounds. And I didn't know this, but I asked for insurance, to cover this, but insurance doesn't cover any of these costs. So always read the small print. Insurance doesn't cover any kind. They put in a small clause there saying it doesn't cover criminal activity. So for 4 months, we have not been able to get this property tenant ready. Our capital has been locked there. And then the amount of hassle in terms of giving witness statements from neighbors, from me to the police, etc., is a nightmare. So yeah, I learned a lot. Who says every day is not a new new day and you don't learn something new? Yeah, Girish, I'll take your question now.
Yeah, after watching this, I'm a little bit worried now because one of my tenants says that he has got a personal sauna in the house. And whilst he may have a personal sauna, I'm now worried whether he is actually surreptitiously growing cannabis there, because it seems suspiciously similar to this, except that it is very much like a small tent. So
I
how
would
much time?
how you would try and resolve this, Girish, is 3 monthly inspections. You can try and conduct them yourself. It will be normally written into the tenancy contract that you will be reviewing it. You could do it under the guise of you're looking to do some improvement works on the property to make it slightly more habitable, or when there is a gas safety element to it, you can join the gas engineer in coming to inspect the boiler, but also having a quick inspection of the property. It is at the end of the day your property, so you going and saying that you need to inspect the roof to check everything is okay, that the bathrooms are okay, that there are no leaks, etc. You're allowed to go and inspect your property provided you've given notice to the tenant. Now, when you give
That's
the
the thing.
notice, there is a chance that they will stop or temporarily shut off that activity. But if you see some evidence pertaining to it, you then have further grounds to take it further forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've given him notice in the past when I've visited. So every time I've visited, he's kind of, it's very clean. So I'm always puzzled. How come there are no droplets or anything anywhere in the house or anywhere in that, on that floor? The second thing is, how much time does it take of yours, Prithvi, with all these things?
A lot. Uh, but I try to call it property university education. Um, and I approach it from the lens of I'm learning something new about humanity, about society. We're all in our little cubby holes, isn't it, in our own workplace? And it's sometimes important to widen your horizon and realize there is a new world out there. But I have operations managers, and I'm very careful about the kind of managing agents that I tend to use as well. So all of this is not me there. This is my builder who's on site, who's gone and identified it. I was only required to go once to allow police to get access. After that, I've not been directly involved in any of this. The
And just
previous
another,
the previous
sorry,
issue
go.
with regards to the first one in London, that took up a lot of my time. I had to go in person to court as well. So that took a lot of my time and energy and frustration, and my financial worry of losing 24,000 pounds, which luckily for my, with people's blessings or whatever, the rent protection guarantee covered it all. So I was good there.
There's a couple of things. I have sent a link on the chat about somebody who experienced exactly like what you did, probably at a much kind of more severe level, in the sense that the house was sort of sold multiple times. The second question I had was, we have a tenant who continuously seems to be not exactly damaging on purpose, but the number of repairs that are coming up on that particular property are just far too many, which are kind of almost inexplainable. And part of our suspicion is that there are children who are sort of jumping in the, for example, in the bathtub and destroying it. What remedies does one have when you can clearly see that the cost of the sort of repairs is extremely high? What remedies would you suggest?
So, I mean, there will always be an inventory report, hopefully, when you go in to look at the state of the property. Fair wear and tear is what you are required to cover, isn't it? Fair wear and tear are the things that you would say is fair. Now, the definition of fair may vary. If you've replaced that particular bathtub with a new one, and 3 months later they're coming and telling you, for example, that there is a crack in it, then you have grounds at that stage to say this is a brand new bathtub. Unless four people have gone and stood on it, or stood on it in a different way that it's not the way to be used, that you're not going to bear the cost, and you give it to them in writing, see what their response is to something like that. Similarly, things like, cracks in the doors, if it's an old latch, stuff like that, all of that will be considered fair wear and tear. But if something new has already been done and that repair is recurring, then you will also have a report by your handyman or your joiner
Okay.
telling you that this is unrealistic. So you will have that. Think of it always in the form of evidence. That if you sat in front of a judge, would he consider that fair wear and tear, or would he say this is not really landlord responsibility?
And originally it was supposed to be a couple and one child, but now they have got four or five children because one of the couple has got children from elsewhere who are now coming and living there. If the property is excessively crowded, what do you say? You say that it is actually not valid now, it is unsafe now for so many people to stay because we have got, I think, three or four children staying in a three-bedroom property.
I don't think that is your judgment. I mean, I can see here that you are being a conscientious human being and a pediatrician, but I'm going to urge you to switch that part of your brain off and switch on your responsibility as a landlord. As a landlord, you are in a contractual agreement with a tenant or tenants. When you come to reviewing your tenancy, which whenever it ends, let's say it ends in a year's time, you originally wanted to let it out to three people because you felt three people is okay. If it suddenly becomes seven people, um, then you're either going to increase the rent because there's going to be far more wear and tear in that property, or you're going to say, I'm sorry, we would like to now let it out or do some remedial works to the property and let it out to a different family. So you have the rent review option, isn't it? That choice is yours to make. Um, you can't do it during the tenancy, and certainly if the family has suddenly expanded, they have a duty to explain that to you, because if it started off with two people and a child, and then the brother or cousin brother or someone else is beginning to now come into the household, that is not fair. That needs to have been pre-agreed on the contract.
They're all children. I mean, the one of the couple has got children who are elsewhere, and there are two or three children who have now started to come and stay with this couple because their parents can no longer look after them. So we are now from
So
having.
they're still one household. Your contract is with the elders, the two majors, not with the minors, isn't it? The
So they can
majors,
have as many minors in a three-bedroom property.
as long as they have parental right. If they are getting children from, I don't know, the street, and and they're running, then you have grounds to challenge that, isn't it?
No, I think the one of the parent has got parental rights over the children who are coming in. So
Then
I
you
think in a
then I'm
way,
afraid legally, you can't challenge that. But at the end of the tenancy, you can certainly review it and take a call.
okay, that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I just want to briefly touch upon deposit protection. If you're not using appropriate registration schemes, it's very important that you do it. You need to be informing the tenants as well as to where you're registering it and sharing details with them. Remember, for you to access that, you need to make sure your property is kosher, all the certificates, etc., are in place, and that you gave them the little tenancy pack, did your right to rent checks, etc., as well, that you have insurance in place during the life cycle of that tenancy, at least buildings insurance. And I'm sure you know this already. I've given you an example. I was lucky that I had rent protection guarantee, but for that big ticket rental in London, if I didn't have that, then I would be in a real soup. And the new deposit schemes that are now coming through are like just 4 or 5 weeks worth of rent. I currently have a tenancy where the tenant has not paid the last month's rent and left the property in a bad shape. So the 5 weeks rent is just about enough to cover the last month's payment, and then nothing else left for all the damage caused to the property. And apart from me giving a bad reference to the tenant, I have no other tools available to me up my sleeve. But make sure you look at even the tenancy deposit scheme. Even to access it is not simple. You have to apply, again share evidence. I've had to show evidence of last month's rent payment not being paid through the bank statements, then showing evidence of the damage done by the tenant, and then all the different invoices before I could even make a claim for that deposit that was there. So just be aware that these are going to be major challenges as we move towards an era where the government is shifting the pendulum towards renters in the next immediate era. It's no longer called renters reform, it's called renters rights bill. So that itself should give you some degree of messaging. Um,
So, Prithvi, if rent is increased annually, because the TDS is 5 weeks, but every year when you are increasing the rental, are you expected to ask the tenant to pay more deposit then for
Correct.
to make it 5 weeks?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely right. Because if you've had a long-standing tenancy and it's like on an annual basis, you're just increasing. Can you imagine in 5 years that gap could be massive, isn't it? Be 50%. Then your tenancy deposit becomes a fraction of the even a month's rent.
So if it
So
is, I mean, because the deposit scheme, the deposit money is with the deposit scheme. It's not with the landlord. So does the tenant have to pay the TDS directly then and get a new certificate?
yes, that's correct. And at the start of every tenancy period, the deposit arrangements should be written into the contract. So, for example, let's say you were originally renting it out for £800 a month, and the deposit that you had was £900, but your particular area, the rents have really gone up. It's gone up to £1,000, and the protection needs to be 1100. You need to write that the deposit amount now is being increased from the original 900 to the 1100. You have two options. You can close down that previous scheme and re-register for 1100. So this is a pathway by which that 900 goes back to the tenant, and now you re-register it to 1100 so that the trail is there. Or you write to the tenancy deposit scheme with a copy of the new tenancy contract, which also incorporates the new deposit, saying here is the additional £200 the tenant has agreed to contribute.
But what if it's on a rolling contract? Because for rolling contract, you don't have a new contract, isn't it? It's just rolls. And
Yeah,
just an email confirmation saying I'm happy to pay the new rental amount.
yeah.
So
The agreement is between you and the tenant.
okay.
You
So
you
you're
and
showing that email as proof of rent increase and then asking the tenant to call up TDS and pay the remaining amount to TDS directly.
not just email. I would urge you, email is okay to say to one another, okay, in principle we both agree, but there needs to be like an addendum to the original contract, which is signed and dated. Whether that is done electronically or by paper is different, but there needs to be a document stating very clearly. Because think about it like this, okay? Emails can easily be said that someone else sent the email on my behalf, it wasn't me. Whereas if you have a signature that matches the original signature, you have a written proof that you can show to courts. My understanding at the moment is that courts still rely on, you'll have seen this concept of either wet ink or a certified digital signature.
Okay. Thank you.
There are addendum contracts available on NRLA and places like that. If you're a member, it's only 60, £70 a year, I think. And you have access to all those documents that you can get from them. I would say that even if it is a rollover contract, be very, very clear about what both parties are agreeing to.
So NRLA membership is worth it?
Yeah, yeah. I would, I,
Definitely,
I would, I would
Okay.
strongly suggest.
Definitely. Definitely.
You've got
very
you've got many senior people telling you here to go for it. So £75 is like £6 a month. Yeah, it's worth it for all the documents you have available, the legal helpline that you can contact. In the bigger scheme of things, it's a very small amount to consider. Plus, they have a lot of, particularly with the renters' rights bill, they have a lot of online CPD available for free, which you can just go and tap into, and it's from very credible resources. So yeah, I would strongly urge you to do that. I'm coming to that in my last slide.
how what is the rate of increase of the rent on a rolling contract typically?
Have you got a coin?
No, how if you're on a roll, if you
I,
have a
I,
tenant,
I, I tend to follow inflation, and I tend to look at the market, and I tend to call up local agents to say, for this kind of property, what do you think the current rate is? And if it's a very good tenant and the market rate has gone up by 10%, I normally put like a 5 or 6% increase, because the void periods that you will end up facing negates the increase that you have. And if it's a good tenant who's looking after your property, you want to keep those tenants, isn't it? So I tend to go 1, 2 or 3% lesser than whatever else the market is doing. Because you've got to remember the tenant also is searching and looking at what other options are available out there.
Yeah, I think it's a good strategy. I agree. Yeah, thanks.
And remember in your rollover contracts or whatever as well, specifying that the original agreement remains, but with the addendum of whatever else you're seeking to add to it. Okay, so rollover contract doesn't mean that it's just rolled over. You still have to be giving the clarity in terms of your responsibilities both as landlord and as tenant still remain exactly like that. The only thing that you're changing is maybe the monthly amount or the way it is paid or weekly amount, and then the deposit that goes along with it. uh,
And
i I would
month's
also,
notice, you give a month's notice or less than that or more than that
for what?
for renewing the contract?
Again, there will be, your end of tenancy notice period will be drafted in. Typically now it is 2 months. The renters
Okay.
rights bill will change some of that, particularly if you're looking to sell and things like that. The notice period has to be, I think, much more, but it's all in draft version, so I don't want to commit to anything as yet. But these things will change. My best practice principle that I would say is, with the students and with the professionals, I tend to go and meet them. And you're not going to believe this, but we've never had a non-paying tenant. And we're talking of 50, 60 HMOs. And they're all managed well because we go and meet these guys or we know their guarantors. The personal touches is, I would say, quite valuable. And also, when I say personal touch, it is also asking them, have you settled in okay? Is there anything else you need in the property? That proactiveness at the start, I kind of akin myself to a little bit like the hospitality business. Although you're a landlord and it is a very sterile contractual agreement, there has to be some kind of personal connect, because then they have a sense of the fact that you are invested in them, and so they are then invested in the property. So I would certainly recommend that. If you can't always do that, then even sending a little note through the agent to say, I hope you're finding your stay okay. It can be a ready-made chat GPT based template, but something to say you have a connect with your tenant is always a good idea. As a professional business now, I would say, even if it is one property that you own, documentation and having almost like a trail where 1 year later, when you look back at your profile as a landlord, have you done all the right things, is very, very important. I've been through many court cases as a doctor, and I can tell you that the legal system is very harsh. It's all evidence based. Try and view everything from that lens if possible, because when things are going hunky dory, it's all very well. It's when the quintessential dot 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 hits the fan, that's when your paperwork, your trails, etc., are very, very important. So tenancy agreements with notice periods, breach clauses, etc., making sure you read all of that, or getting chat gpt to do that on your behalf. Even if a agent has done it for you, but you reviewing it is important. An agent is only your representative. At the end of the day, the responsibility is still yours. As the renters rights bill comes in, I think you have to proactively screen a lot of these guys. Again, meeting sometimes the tenant, just because somebody is paying you 50 pounds more doesn't mean that they are a better tenant. Okay, you have to make sure you're screening and checking that all these things are important. Trust me when I tell you, 50 pounds versus 24,000 pounds. You saw that example that I gave you. It's being penny wise and pound foolish. We talked about inspecting your properties regularly. If you don't do it, put it in as a reminder every 3 months for either your handyman or your agent or someone else to go and do this on your behalf. Keep your power team, very, very close to your heart, and keep them happy. This includes your agent, sending them a Christmas card or an Easter card, keeping your core team very happy, because then you can extend that goodwill in asking trades to go and review the property on your behalf, taking photographs and feeding information back to you. That way you don't have to physically be there, but those guys will do it on your behalf. uh, uh, Being in touch with lawyers, these could be your regular conveyances, but bouncing ideas off them, saying, I have this tricky situation, or what would I do? Those questions you asked me, such as, property has expanded from 3 to 7, what do I do? You'll get some free advice from them, but developing that relationship with them is very, very important. And I would say keep a crisis plan. By that I mean both a financial crisis plan. So we tend to keep about 3 months worth of rent in any of our businesses always there. And then a contingency. Does your insurance cover for if there is a real serious situation like flooding, or in my example, the roof caving in? Does your insurance cover for the tenants to be rehoused somewhere while you're doing any of that? And if the law force is involved, don't lose your cool. Always remember that you will always have recourse to the right kind of support. NRLA being a good example, or asking on our network, WhatsApp network, for what is the right kind of steps. Having a plan in place is sometimes always a good thing. I will, because it's 8:30, I'll not go into this, but we've already covered some of this now. Section 8 has disappeared. Section 21 is now there, but I hopefully have covered some of it, making sure your building's insurance has got legal protection cover within it. It's just an additional 18-20 pounds. Always take that, always add that on as a bolt on. It's not automatically offered. And some interesting resources that I would suggest you do is have your tenancy agreements reviewed, whether that is through chat gpt, etc. Have an audit system in place where, using virtual assistants, etc., you check that every property's safety profile is up to date. It's great that you're coming in for webinars like this, but keep a monthly subscription to some of these free property magazines, or they cost, I think, £1 a month or something like that. Some of you may know about Property Hub. They make offers all the time, and for £50 a year they send magazines, or there are podcasts to listen to. There are local resources available to you for what are your responsibilities as a landlord. There are resources from shelter who are more tenant friendly, but it's good to see what are the kinds of things a landlord is still responsible for. And then landlords association or equivalent bodies, I think, is invaluable. Even if you're starting off with one or two properties, I would say get into the habit of doing it. You guys are all doctors, you're registered with GMC, or your royal colleges, etc. NRLA is the equivalent for landlords as well. And make sure you have ready-made contact information for all of these things: legal counsel, property managers, your agents, emergency trades, gas, plumbing, electricity, fire safety, etc., etc. And maybe sharing a copy of that with your tenants as well, saying if it's an emergency, please contact these, and letting them know in advance. And I tend to keep, like, say, a list of template documents for everything that I use, like a checklist. And these are also available with NRLA and other associations like that, so you can tap into that as well. I'm conscious I've run over time. Sorry for running over time, but I hope you got some flavor with those case studies of what to do when. I'm happy to take some questions for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll close this down. I haven't been able to look at the chat box, but I'll go into the chat box now. Yeah, Yogesh, go for it. You've raised your hand.
I've got a few questions in the chat, but the main one is do you or do you get somebody to find your tenants? And what 3 top things do you really want to make sure they have before you let them go into your property? And by the way, this talk is amazing because it's so real life, and half the things you suffer from, I have too, and I don't know how you have to cope. But well done for sharing. Thank you.
No, it's good. I think we thank you for recognizing it, and I think everyone shares their success stories. I think the time you learn the most is when you go through that turbulence, and then you have a story to tell at the end. And I'm hoping that from my mistakes or from your mistakes, other people will learn so that they don't repeat those mistakes. So thanks for that. Coming back to your original question, I don't personally always screen them, but for HMOs we have one type of agent, and for conventional vanilla buy-to-lets we have a different type of agent. With the HMOs, my operations officer will always go and meet these groups of students for the viewings to get a sense of what they are like. Are they organized? Do they turn up for the viewings on time? Are they first year students? Are they final year students? We usually like to choose second-year students, and the reason being that they already have the experience of how to be tenants as a first year. They're not final year students, so they will not run away. They've got a third year where we can pin them down. So we tend to pick and choose when we have that choice of what kind of tenants we go for. Two, we try and see if we can find people who have guarantors to back them up as well. So this is usually bank of mom and dad who are happy to. So if they have come visiting with the kids, with the vanilla buy-to-lets, we usually prefer people who are in the defensive sector. I know we're not allowed to discriminate, but people who are typically working in universities or who are working in hospitals, that's the kind of tenant profile we like to choose because they would have gone through DBS checks, etc. So a little bit of second layer checks has already happened. Two, we like to see landlord references. And three, when we conduct the viewing, if we feel a real connect with them, we feel communication seems very clear in what they're saying to you. Usually within 5 minutes of speaking to people, we have found that you do get a sense of, are these going to be good guys or are they going to be a challenge? I hope I've given you some kind of a sense. Some of this has got to be subjective. I don't think all of it is objective, mostly objective, but there's a subjective element as well.
No, that's really good. And your insurance broker, who is it? Because I can't believe you got insurance for that thing. The roof had come down, you put it back up. I didn't know that was an insurable event. So well done.
So Pegasus, but I always go through CIA, and because we've got quite a few through CIA with our joint venture partners, I was able to pin a particular insurance agent there and tell them that, look, it's a rinse and repeat. I'm going to keep coming to you for my recurring business, but these are an absolute must need for every policy. They include, so no rent protection cover when I have a guarantor, but any property which has rent above 1,500, I want rent protection guarantee. So that's one condition. Two, if there are major structural issues, 3 months of being able to rehouse the tenant. They always ask you this question: is the property in a good standard of maintenance, etc.? Which it was. We had someone come and say that the rain or the snow that year was so heavy that that wooden beam had just caved in, like this. So the property was, we'd had a structural survey report to say, everything was good. So it was not our fault. So second thing is always get an option of rehousing tenants for a minimum of 3 months. And the third thing is I always want legal cover in case there is dispute with neighbors or the tenants, etc. The level of legal cover also is important. It's got to be, I think, close to £100,000. Some of these legal matters, I'm sure you will know this, Yogesh. You've been in the whole court system. They charge you sometimes 250 or £500 an hour, and all you need is 100 hours, and £50,000 will just disappear. So legal protection for about 100,000. Those are my kind of three top tips.
Is that CIA landlords insurance?
Yeah, CIA landlords insurance. And then when you go to them, you have to specify what are the things you absolutely want. I don't go always for contents. I always go for buildings. Contents always means you then have to pay more. I always ask my tenants and I remind them at the start that if you've got expensive bikes, laptops, etc., or you cause major damage to the carpets or anything like that, you will be held responsible. So cigarette butts, etc., if they make a big hole in the carpet and have to replace the whole carpet, that's going to be your responsibility.
Prithvi, how did you know that the beam had, caved in a bit? Because tenants don't check and you are not there physically checking all this. So how did you find out that the beam had caved in slightly because of snow or rain?
So when you went into the loft, what happened was if you imagine the triangle, the apex of this, the middle bit, had caved in, and the poor tenants, I think a young student, first year student, just sent my agent a photograph to say something seems to have happened to the ceiling. We've just come back from whatever the break was, and is this normal? And then we
Okay,
went
so it
and
was
looked
the
at it.
tenant. It was the tenant who actually went up and reported.
No,
Because
this is
I've
a
had
loft bedroom.
tenants.
It's a loft bedroom.
Okay,
It's a
got it.
loft. It was a single loft bedroom, and that had caved down like that.
And sorry, I missed the first part of the talk, when the mortgage advisor was there. What was this he's saying about North Ireland and Northeast in just one line summary?
capital, so the capital growth in that particular area is hitting double digits. I think it was 13% last year. It's 10% year on year in terms of property price increase. And the north of England has been resilient and has been growing at about 4 to 5%, even in a so-called negative sentiment market.
That's quite strange because I'm just learning, and I only have one property through buy to let, through company, and I have a property in Northeast. And actually, I just got it evaluated because I'm 400 miles away, and I'm so fed up of self-managing, and agents are useless that I'm trying to sell that property, and it's showing a dip of from what price I bought it for 3 years ago. It's actually gone down by 4.5%.
I mean, I don't know the specifics of your property, and within areas there will be micro areas as well. So lower value properties which are maybe not always connected to employment sectors or to connectivity by road or transport, etc., will not be in demand. This is an overall market trend that they're talking about. And I would say that it is true because we've got properties in Manchester and Yorkshire, and that trend is about right. It is steadily growing. So I don't think that is wrong. That is hard data. I mean, it is from, I don't know where his source of information was, but it'll usually be ONS data and things like that. So that is credible data. Your individual example can't always necessarily match what is happening at a wider scale.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just one more question about insurance. That thing about the beam coming down, what do they call that? Insurance against what? So you could rehouse them for 3 months. Has that got a
So
name?
it was a structural change, a material change in the house, which otherwise was in good nick and maintained well. So it is a buildings insurance, isn't it? So
Oh,
the
okay.
building is not safe to be habitable anymore. We showed them the photographic and videographic evidence. They didn't even send a surveyor. They just asked, what is it we want to do? We got a structural engineer, we got a builder who clarified what all needs to be done. And on that basis, they were happy to rehouse. They didn't pay for just to be clear, they didn't actually they only paid for the structural element of it. The rest of it, the roof, etc., was all on personal cost.
Because
And,
it
and,
wasn't
and
covered.
because it wasn't
Right.
covered.
Oh, right.
So,
But
so the whole, so I took that opportunity to make that loft into 2 additional bedrooms, and a single bedroom small loft became 2 beds and a bathroom. And I was then subsequently from 5 bed make it a 6 bed HMO. They paid 7,600 or something towards the beam, structural engineer calculations, etc., only to be able to rehouse existing tenancy. The additional, I think it was an additional 14,500 pounds or whatever. This was in 2021. Came out of pocket, but I was able to revalue that property and recoup it then pretty quickly.
I'm surprised they didn't pay for all of the works. But it was under building insurance. But they just surely have to redecorate once you repair it. So I'm surprised that wasn't covered. That's all.
Yeah, I was time pressured at that time, Yogesh. For me, the key thing was rehousing these guys because I also had the next tenancy due to start as well. So at that now going back, with the benefit of retrospectoscope, I could have called in a structural surveyor to say, the same structural surveyor who did the survey a year back, to say, this was not our doing, the property was in a good nick, and this should be covered under comprehensive buildings cover. But they would then have only covered like for like. They wouldn't have allowed me to put in the dormer, the full span dormer that I did want to. So I was being opportunistic as well. And so I did fight it at that stage.
Okay. No, so it's under building insurance, which most policies cover. But it's not an extra thing, is it? It's a
No,
standard
so
building
the
insurance.
like for like, so that is the beam on the top and then the reinforcement required in the flooring and one side slats, which was 7,500 pounds, was covered by them. The opposite side, which is the dormer, and then all of the boarding and plastering and re-electricity, etc., was naturally my cost to
Yeah.
take. There could have been parts of it which I could have argued is still to be covered by them, but you choose the battles you want to fight, isn't it?
No, I don't know how you do have time to do all this and read all the policy You read the policy documents yourself, do you?
Well, I get Chat GPT to do it for me, saying this is my brief, and you tell me whether this meets it or not. And
Okay.
then specifically on the phone calls, I tell them, are you recording this conversation? And this is my minimum that I need. And if this is not there, I will read it, but I need you to ensure that the underwriter has looked into it. Then the some degree of responsibility is transferred back to the insurer as well.
And so the last thing, I was surprised the party war matter was a criminal matter. It's a civil matter, so the police should never be involved with that. So you
Sorry,
got
which
very. The party wall issue is a civil matter, not a criminal matter.
uh,
The party wall issue is a civil matter, not a criminal matter.
no, yeah, that's correct. But the reason they called the police was they were worried that their side of the house would collapse, and they were not notified. They should have been notified in advance. So they called the police. The police didn't really entertain it much. I was able to provide the evidence to the police saying a party wall notice was submitted. Me and my builder can give you witness statement to indicate he did say yes. And the police then just went away. I was then
Oh,
able to meet the neighbor directly and sit down with him over a cup of coffee to say, what is your grouse? What are you really worried about? Your tenants are not going anywhere, and this crack you're talking about is a plasterboard crack. I promise to remedy it all for you in writing. And then, like I said, when he then found out I treated his granddaughter, etc., it was all fine in the end. Um,
thank you,
so
thank you.
no problem. I'll just quickly go through. I don't want to miss out anyone, and I don't want you guys to hog the limelight. Let me go through everyone else's questions. I agree regarding personal touch. I often go and visit them once. Yeah, well done. Excellent. That's well done, Girish. Yeah. Chirag, as usual, great talk. Lot to learn. Oh, good. MJ buys rent guarantee separately or buy it with insurance. It doesn't really matter. That is underwritten separately anyway. And rent guarantee requires you to have done the referencing through a third party agency rather than you doing the referencing. So using credible third party referencing agencies is important before you get a rent guarantee insurance. Can you please suggest some accountants for buy to let to do tax returns? Um, so there are many. If you've got a portfolio, then more than four properties, I would say go to someone like AA accountants. Otherwise, your local accountants, should be enough. Otherwise, they can charge quite a lot. That's just personal advice. And there are quite a few. If you like that personal connect of going to a local accountant, and I'm a bit old school like that, I sit down with my accountant and I ask them the questions. Can this be claimed? Can this not be claimed? Have you put this into capital expense? Have you put this into revenue expense? And why not? And it's a learning process as well, so you understand that better. So simple accountants can help you if it is one or two buy to lets. Otherwise, it can be quite a big expense if you go to a professional property accountant. But when you're searching for it, look for property tax accountants. CIA is a comparison website, yes, but they're very experienced in specific landlord insurance policies. They then source the right kind of product to match you, a little bit like Money Supermarket or one of these other websites. So your call is recorded with CIA. CIA is acting like the middleman, but CIA is responsible when they send you that email saying, this is your policy. It has been underwritten by this particular insurance company. Okay, I think I've answered most questions. If I haven't, then I'm sorry, but thank you all for giving me your time this evening. I will try and compress this recording, and it sounds like Yogesh, you've got your AI to do some minutes, etc. as well. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that on the WhatsApp group, so whoever likes visual will have a YouTube link sent to them. The ones who maybe want short, succinct ways, hopefully Yogesh's AI will be able to generate and chuck something out for you all as well. But thank you all. The next talk will be hopefully in third week of October, where I'm hoping to get a professional to talk to us about how we can transfer assets from parent to survivors through a family investment company structure, or what other different classes of shares are there within limited companies. So that can be a learning exercise as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.